Hi everybody, it's crazy, it's Monday, and it's time for the UPBGE video of the week. Now, before I get started, gotta give a shout out to my trusted, because you guys rock. To my crazy fam, I love you guys. Now, last week, we left off with common settings, and it was on page 28, so if you're following along in the book, if you don't have the book, it's down there in the description. I've been going through over that almost every video. But the book is down in the description, and you can also, while you're there, make sure you get the files. Okay, so let's see here. Switch over here. We left off with the occluder last week and character. Okay, and so basically those were the ones we left off with. Let me see if I can open that other one because I do want to put that one in there. Yeah, the navigation mesh. So when you hit play, it will find its way over to where it was supposed to go. Okay, and that was the other one we had. All right, so uh, we're going to continue on page 28. Whew! With all the physics types out of the way, let's look at some of the shared settings common to most of the physics types described earlier. Okay, so basically what it's talking about is, see, we're going to go off of that. We're going to go to no collision for right now. Okay, we got actor, which, and if you pick, like, for example, dynamic or static or any one of those, you'll get an actor. Okay, the actor makes the object part of the physics evaluation loop. An object not marked as an actor is ignored by the near and radar sensors, although it will still obey the laws of physics. So if you don't have it set up for an actor, then it won't follow, it won't use near or radar sensors very well. Okay. It's a ghost, and that's this one right here. Okay. Makes an object not react to collision such that it will pass through another like a ghost. Collisions are still detected for ghost objects. So any sensors that detect collision between two ghost objects will still fire. But the objects will not bounce apart as they normally would. So your collision will say, okay, these are your two ghost objects. They can hit, but they're not going to bounce off. They're just going to bounce through. But it'll say that there was a collision, so the collision will still happen. Okay. Okay. Invisible. Okay. If you click this little guy right here, skips rendering of the object while still calculating all the physics and logic. This is useful for creating invisible walls and edges of maps to prevent players from visiting places you do not want them to go. Okay, so you can put, like, if I had this separated and I didn't want them to go through this wall, but I had a nice scene there, you can actually put that as invisible and it will not see it when you hit play. Okay, the player will go through it, and actually I'll just make it invisible real quick and I'll show you. Look, it's gone. You can't see it. Okay, now it wasn't going to follow through to that because this is actually set on navigation mesh. Okay, so it would have normally done that, but if I took this wall and separated it from the nav mesh, okay, let's turn that one into nav mesh. Okay, and then turn this one invisible. Okay, and I hit P, it will still follow the nav mesh, but you don't see any walls. Your character cannot do anything. Okay, so just FYI. All right, so let's go on to the next one. Let's see. Yeah, I got all static. I don't know if. Let's see, mass. Where's my mass? Okay, it's not on this one, so let's do dynamic. Should have mass. Okay, I don't see mass in here. But anywho, I'm gonna read it off any rate. Okay, mass sets the mass of the object. Actually, I think that is over here. That's over here. Your mass would be in here somewhere. It should be in the regular physics. Where is it? Friction. Okay, right here, mass. I'm sorry, I didn't see it, y'all. All right, so mass sets the mass of an object. A heavier object requires more force to move. Contrary to intrusion, a heavier object does not fall faster than a lighter object. See note, hammer and feather. We'll read that here in just a moment. So increasing the mass will not make your object fall faster. To make objects fall faster, lower the dampening on the object or increase the gravity in world settings, okay? All right, hammer and feather. A hammer and a feather fall at the same rate in vacuum. In air, the drag force will slow down a lighter object more than a heavier object. So, a heavier object indeed falls faster than a lighter object. But since Blender does not model air friction, object mass does not affect how fast they fall. It's not a bug. Okay? Just as an 18-wheeler truck hitting a bunny won't have a happy ending for the bunny. The physics engine works best when the objects interacting have masses of a similar magnitude. When an object with a very large mass collides with an object with a very small mass, instability might be created in the physics engine. As a general rule, keep all objects within 2 magnitudes of the mass to each other. So if an object weighs 1.0, it shouldn't interact with an object that is much heavier than 100.00. Okay, your next one is your radius. Okay, controls the radius of the collision sphere. If a collision bound other than sphere is selected, this setting, it has no effect. Okay, so if you choose anything else besides that, down here in collision type, okay, collision bounds, any one of these besides sphere, this will not work. Okay, let me make sure I read that right. If a collision bound other than a sphere is selected, this setting has no effect. So as long as it's on sphere, this radius will have an effect. If it's not, just say it's on box setting, then this will not affect it because it has no radius. Okay. No sleeping. Where's that one at? I know that. Yeah, right here. Okay. If you check no sleeping, let's turn off invisible. Okay. By default, the physics engine automatically suspends the physics calculation for an object when its motion is sufficiently slow. This is known as sleeping. Putting the object to sleep can free up the CPU cycle and increase game performance until another object interacts with it again. Putting objects to sleep can cause some odd-looking behavior, such as slow-moving objects coming to a sudden stop. No sleeping disables this optimization. The downside to that, no sleeping might lead to some odd, jittery behavior for objects that are not perfectly stable. Okay, so if you put on no sleeping mode, anything that can possibly jitter or bounce around on the floor will probably bounce around and jitter on the floor because it's interacting with the floor. Okay, it's one of those. Additionally, there are options for controlling when objects go to sleep in the world properties under the physics deactivation label. This settings can be used to change the global delay before objects are deactivated. So what they're talking about is in here. Let's see, physics deactivation. I don't see anything that remotely says physics deactivation. Let's see, Python console. Okay, so don't know. We'll figure that out later. See. Under the physics deactivation label. So there is no physics deactivation label at all for this. So maybe they took that out in future ones because it probably just didn't work. Okay, so let's go back to our physics. Let's see, there's not one in this, is there? No. Just collisions. Okay, so next one we're going to be doing is dampening. I don't think that's in here. I think that's a subset of that. No. Sleeping. See if we can find dampening, y'all. If y'all see it before me, let me know. There we go. Here it is, right here. Okay, this is dampening. Okay, applies a drag force on an object. A dampening of 0 corresponds to no friction at all. So if you have it set to 0, there won't be any friction. Just like a spherical cowl traveling in a vacuum. Okay. A dampening of 1.0 corresponds to a dragging force so strong that the object will be unable to move. Translation dampening slows down an object's movement. Rotational dampening slows down the object spinning. Okay. Well, that's for force field. Okay, guess that works. See, anisotropic friction. Hopefully, I'm saying that right. See, anisotropic friction. Do I see that anywhere? It doesn't show anything for friction. They just got regular friction. I mean, oh, there it is right here. Okay, if you check that, you can do any of the 3 axes. Controls the friction force per axis. You can use this to mimic objects that have different coefficients of friction. Depending on the orientation of the object, for example, a skateboard slides easily along its length, but is almost unmovable sideways. Okay. Form factor. Okay, so let's uncheck this. Form factor is right here. Okay. The tooltip says this setting scales the inertia tensor. Make sense? No. Well, aren't you glad you had this book? Form factor controls the tendency for an object to roll. So the bigger the value, the less likely an object will roll and tumble. A smaller value makes the object much more likely to rotate. Set the value too low and the object will become unstable. The default value is a good balance between physics stability and realism. So they're saying 0.4 is good. So I guess the form factor of 5 would be, kind of like hard to roll. So, all right, collision bounds. Let's see if we can find that. Form factor radius. Oh, right here. Okay, this is your collision bounds right here. This little guy. Okay. This is the shape of the object as it appears on to the physics engine. This might sound surprising, but the shape of the object used for the physics calculation is not always the same as the one that is displayed. The distinction is important because of for performance reasons. A rough proxy shape is often used to play in place of the actual geometry. This way, the user still sees a fully detailed object on the screen, but the physics engine can run a lot faster using a simplified collision bound. It is important to try to use the simplest collision bound possible in order to keep the game's engine performance fast. Now, as you see, if you're looking at this, okay, I have it set for the visual mesh, which is this line right here, and as you see, the physics for that is way off. Okay, so it depends on how you set this up. You can do triangular mesh, and you won't see it, but it actually follows the curves. Okay, a convex hull does about the same thing. A cone, yeah, there you go. Okay, a cylinder, yeah, same thing. Sphere, yep, same thing. It's a little bit off. Okay, capsule, same thing. Okay, if you have an empty, then I've never played with the empty one, so. But most of the time, people use either a box if it's a square shape, or they use a convex hull, or if it's kind of roundish, and they use a triangular mesh if they want it to be nice and perfectly around with it. Okay. All right. So let's scroll down. So we got capsule, box, sphere, cylinder, and cone. Okay. These are some of the basic primitives that can be used to approximate different collision bounds. Their shapes are self-explanatory. To see exactly how the bounding box is applied to your model in-game, turn on Show Physics Visualization in the Game Object screen, or Game Options screen. Okay, so that would be under your Render tab, I do believe. Yeah, it should be in here. And as you go to Debug, okay, you'll have Render Quality and Physics Visualization. So if you're using UPBGE, it's going to be here under Debug, okay? And a lot of them are under Debug too, the original version. But back then, they used to just have it in here. Didn't have it under Debug. It was actually under Game Options, okay? So if you want to see the frame rate, renderer, curative properties, and physics visualizations, you can do the here, boundaries, so on and so forth, okay? All right. So when the collision, I want to take it over here to this real quick. Let me switch you over. Okay, as you see, you have the box setting, you have the sphere setting, you have cylinder, you have cone, you have kick back over to it, that convex hull. Yeah, this is convex hull, okay, and this is the triangular mesh. Okay, those are the main ones. They do have an empty on there, and I've never tried it. Also, there is the capsule as well. It says that in this one, I think. Yeah, it does say capsule. They just don't show it in here, okay? All right, so let's continue on reading. When the collision bound is set to convex hull, the collision bound takes the shape of the object, but with all the concave areas filled in, convex hull can accurately approximate an object of any shape as long as it doesn't have any negative space, such as holes. For example, a donut-shaped rigid body object set to convex hull will be treated as the hole, as if the hole isn't there. Okay, so convex hull looks like, switch over to it. Okay, is this one right here. Okay, get off of that. No. Okay, so convex hull does this right here. Okay, so if there's any areas that are open, it basically draws lines around just to make it kind of where you have something there. Okay, and let's see. On the next one, the triangular mesh is a little bit different, and actually I'll just switch it back over here real quick. Okay, triangular mesh, this is the most robust collision bound type. It will create a collision bound that is an exact duplicate of the actual mesh. If you want to ensure that the collision bound matches the visual mesh exactly, this is the setting to use. So why don't we use this setting all the time? The reason is performance and stability. Okay, and that's true. The physics engine is far better optimized for simple primitives, such as a box, than an arbitrary shaped triangle mesh. Okay, so basically, if you want to have this perfect, so things can pass up underneath it, then you use triangular mesh, but you're going to be suffering some performance and stability issues. But if it's not that big of a deal, it's just if something just runs into it, then no one's really going to notice this little bump right here. They'll just see it and they'll just think that it hit it. Okay, you wouldn't want to use this, because if something hits it, up here, it's going to hit up here and bounce off, and it's going to be like, oh, wait a minute, why is it way up here? That's a big axiom in a lot of video games. Okay, like if you put a square one around, anything from this ear to the other ear, from the bottom or front of the chin to the back of the head, and the top of the eyebrows to the bottom of the chin, are going to bounce off. Okay, so it's going to hit like this side here, even though it got nowhere near the cheek. Okay, sphere, same thing. Cylinder, same thing. Okay. Let's see. There we go. Get back over there. All right. Visualizing collision bounds. Once the collision bound is set, you should notice that the collision bound is visualized as as dashed lines in the 3D viewport. This helps you visualize the relationship between the collision bounds and the visual mesh. To visualize the collision bounds in-game, turn on Show Physics Visualization in the game option screen at runtime. What they're talking about is you're going to come over to here, and then you're going to turn this little guy on. Okay? Now, I've never seen it, seen the visualizations unless it has an option to view them, but I have never seen them on something, and it doesn't really show it. So it's probably something you got to set up in your preferences. Okay? All right, collision margin. Okay, that's this little guy right here. Okay, that's your margin. Okay, the Bullet Physics Engine SDK manual explains that the collision margin is an internal setting that improves the performance and stability of the collision detected by giving thickness to each face. It is highly recommended that you do not adjust this setting outside its normal range of 0.5. Actually, it doesn't even have a setting. Okay, most of the time the margin is just set to off. Okay. All right. In some cases, too high of a value will result in a tiny error gap between colliding objects. Too small of a value will increase the chance of missing collisions between objects. Okay. Your compound, right here, this little guy. Okay. The compound setting makes objects linked together by parent-children relationships behave as if they are a single physics entity. So when you put this on and you have, say, this mesh and this mesh parented, then it's going to treat both of these with this physics type, whether or not you have physics on this. Okay? It will add with that. You can actually have this and then have it parented to this, to your main mesh, and then compound it here. Okay, so it will say, okay, these two meshes are going to be automatically one mesh, and you would pick that. Okay, most of the time you just leave it off because it's not even useful unless you're really doing something detailed. But why use compound when you can just join your objects together with Control J? Apart from the fact that there might be times when you need to control individual objects, so joining them might not be an option. Using compound collision bounds made up of simple primitives is actually recommended over using one triangle mesh collision bound. The reason is again that the combination of single primitives is faster to compute than a triangle mesh. Okay. Hand-on tutorial creating compound objects. Okay, so what we're gonna do, we're gonna end it there. Okay, because I'm at 23 minutes. I didn't realize that was that long. We're gonna leave it here on page 31. Okay, page 31 for next week. We're gonna do hands-on tutorial creating compound objects. So next week we're actually gonna do a full tutorial. Okay, we're gonna do a tutorial from the book. Okay, so let me kick back out of these. Oh, nope, we hit the wrong one. Okay, so we're gonna continue on page 31 next week with a full hands-on tutorial creating compound objects. Okay, and it looks like it's gonna be pretty fun. I mean, we're gonna be doing some, neat little stuff with it. So, and it's going to be a short one. It's not going to be super huge. So nothing to worry about like, oh my God, I got to practice. Trust me, it's not, it's only 4 of them. Okay. So we'll leave it at that until next week.